Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. We appreciate you taking time and hanging out with us today. I mean, I guess we could finally say, the NBA draft is coming up here in just under 2 weeks.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it feels like a never-ending pre-draft process, and finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel here.
Yeah, and before we get into Obi and your mock draft, your latest mock draft that we have here in front of us, I mean, what's crazy is that right now they're talking about when the season could potentially start. I mean, it could potentially be as early as December 22nd. You can have the draft on the 18th of November, and less than a month later the season tips off. I mean, that's going to be a huge transition period for a lot of these rookies who have just been doing some private workouts since the NCAA tournament was pulled out from underneath them, and the next time they step on the floor, which could potentially be for their NBA team.
Yeah, no, I think these rookies are going to be at a huge disadvantage. The one thing is, I mean, most of these guys are in great shape because they've been working so hard and they've had a long period of time to work with their trainers and get their bodies right. But just the transition to the NBA, I mean, it's an entirely different game and much more sophisticated. And so, I mean, there's going to be a lot thrown at these guys right off the bat. Where in most years they have an opportunity to start working out with their coaches, and go to summer league, and having a pretty big window to kind of get caught up. They're not going to have that luxury this year, so it's going to be interesting to see how many of these players are going to be capable of stepping in and filling roles right off the bat.
You mentioned Summer League. How important was Summer League for the other guys, and how will it affect not having Summer League for the upcoming rookies?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really big. I mean, for rookies, it's big for second and third year guys that are still developing, and it's a good opportunity for guys to play really structured, organized basketball against top level competition, and it's a big part of development process for these young guys. And so I do think it's a pretty big loss for everybody involved.
Matt, your latest NBA mock draft, again, and we're going to get to that in a second, but you look at the talent that's in this upcoming draft. It's not the most talented draft class in some years, but just how deep is this draft? I mean, how would you describe this draft when you start making your mock draft boards?
Yeah, I mean, the two things that come to mind is that, there's a lot of parity and there is depth. There isn't the clear-cut number one, number two guy like there is in some years' drafts. I mean, I think there's a lot of parity, like I said, and, with that, it makes it really challenging to project what these teams are actually going to do because I think teams have a number of different options at different spots in the draft.
All right, so your latest NBA mock draft that you have Anthony Edwards going number one overall to the Timberwolves. Do you try to anticipate trades in the draft? Do you anticipate any trades, or is this just you lay your mock draft out based on the order that it is currently?
Yeah, we try to stay away from projecting trades, and there's so many rumors going on, and we are privy to some insider information as far as what's being discussed. With Minnesota specifically taking Anthony Edwards, it's one of these deals where if I were to bet on it, I think Minnesota is going to end up moving that pick. I know they want to, which is a matter if they're going to be able to get a deal that's worthwhile. If they're not, I think they've sort of centered in on the top two guys for them are Anthony Edwards or James Wiseman. And for me, I question if they're really, when push comes to shove, want to throw out a lineup there of Karl Anthony Towns and Wiseman. But, those are 2 7-footers, and just even though the Lakers had success this year playing a lot of big guys, I still think that would be an aggressive move. And Anthony Edwards is, I've said it all year, he's got the most upside in the draft, and so that's why I went with Edwards at 1.
So you have Obi Toppin going number 5 overall to the Cleveland Cavaliers. What is his ceiling? What's the highest you could see him going? I mean, is there any chance at all the Dayton fans here could potentially hear his name go number 1?
Yeah, when the lottery the order first got set, I put Obi at 1. I really like the fit with Minnesota. Mm-hmm. As things have sort of progressed from them, it seems like they, Obi, even though Minnesota's interested in him, my bet would be they have him slightly behind those first 2 guys. And so, I mean, I think there's a world where, Minnesota were to move back and take Toppin. However, I don't think Obi is going to be the number 1 pick.
What do you make of the rumors about James Wiseman turning down the potential of being drafted number 1 to the T-Wolves?
Yeah, I mean, all that's where the agents kind of step in and try and manipulate things. If Minnesota thinks basketball-wise he's the right fit, I don't think they're going to be afraid of taking James. James is known to be a good kid. And I've seen this before with different teams and agents trying to manipulate things. And, in most cases, if the team decides to go with it, even against the agents' desires, it ends up working itself out. So, I don't think that's a huge roadblock for Minnesota.
You know, we know the names Obi Toppin, Anthony Edwards, but like some of the other names people don't know, like Devin Vassell, Elijah Hughes, and those type of guys. Like, talk about some of those guys that could basically are equal, but you have, you know, Devin Vassell going 9th and Elijah Hughes 22. Like, there's a pack of guys who are almost basically the same player.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to sell, you know, in a tier slightly higher than Elijah Hughes. But yeah, you're right. Elijah Hughes is a guy that I think was, you know, almost, you know, hidden in plain sight this year. You know, he's had somewhat of an unorthodox path. You know, initially went to East Carolina. You know, he's probably under recruited out of high school and transferred to Syracuse. And he's a guy that just kept getting better each year. And there's actually a few guys that have had similar paths that are in a good spot right now with the draft. Malachi Flynn from San Diego State. He initially went to Washington State. You know, older player, had a really great year at San Diego State. They only lost 2 games the whole year. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. And then Jalen Harris, another guy that's older that was a transfer, originally went to Louisiana Tech and transferred to Nevada, and had a terrific year this year. And so, you know, 3 guys, you know, those 3 guys I think are sort of the sleeper picks. You know, a little older, you know, not the one and done types.
All right, we have Matt Babcock with us here on the Justin Kinner Show with Kev Nash talking NBA draft. He's an NBA draft analyst with Babcock Hoops, and we're excited to have him on. Now, you're a former NBA agent, and I'm curious, if you were an agent in this situation, what kind of advice would you be giving to not only players who are free agents looking for new homes, but even any rookies right now, these guys out of college who are waiting to hear their name on draft night?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the draft goes, you know, it's been such a long process. You know, as far as how I think it's going to unfold, I think it's going to be pretty typical. I mean, the draft is hard to really pinpoint as far as exactly where players are going to go or what teams are going to do. I mean, you know, even most teams don't know what they're doing yet because there's so many, you know, trade opportunities. You're not sure which players are going to be left on the board. You know, every team really has a completely different big board, and so it really makes draft night, you know, exhausting and exciting at the same time. And as far as free agency goes, that's where things are tough. You know, these team owners are really worried about the financials, you know, with the backlash of the pandemic and whatnot. And so I'm interested to see, you know, how this free agent market, you know, unfolds. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of teams, you know, playing it pretty conservatively.
When's free agency start? Is that going to come after the draft? I mean, when?
Yeah, I believe it's is it the 22nd? I mean, it's right after the draft. I can't remember the date off the top of my head. I believe it's the 22nd.
Man, like, are teams fans of that? Wouldn't you like to hit the free agent market first, and then base what you need to draft after that, or is drafting first and then filling it with free agents better? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to have free agency first. You know, that way teams are able to draft knowing what they have in place. You know, sometimes teams have felt pressure to, you know, say draft a, you know, point guard because their backup point guard is a free agent. They don't know if he's going to return, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, it ends up being a little disorganized in my opinion. But I don't think it's too big of a deal either way, to be honest.
Can't believe we had you on this long and this name hasn't come up. LaMelo Ball, go.
Yeah, no, yeah, LaMelo, he's been struggling with his interviews. It seems like a lot of people have kind of soured on him quite a bit. Obviously, he's been the media and the public sweetheart all year of, you know, people talking about, you know, potential number 1 pick. I have heard his name is still being considered by Golden State. If Golden State were to pass on him, I could see him slip into all the way to number 7 to Detroit. And so, yeah, draft night, I mean, just with the LaMelo Ball situation, that's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, we've seen the circus that is the Ball family with the Flying to the Hoop high school basketball showcase here in Dayton, Ohio, when him and his family came in when their high school or when his team played here a few years ago. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he struggles in those interview things. Let's just put it that way. Now, so you have Obi at 5. Why the Cavs? Why are they a good fit? And why would the Hornets and I guess the Warriors, I mean, they're in a good spot, but why would these other teams, why do you have him falling past those teams? What do some of the guys that you have going to the teams in front of him bring to the table that Obi doesn't, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I already brought up Minnesota, but Golden State, you know, it sounds like Obi is one of the names that's been discussed there. It's just my gut's telling me that they're going to select somebody else. As far as Charlotte, I mean, I think if they went with Obi, it would be a big commitment to extreme small ball, which it doesn't sound like they want to do. They drafted P.J. Washington last year, who plays the 4, who's really done well and has given a lot of promise. Chicago, you know, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they looked at him hard. But they've got Lauri Markkanen, they got Wendell Carter. Might be too many cooks in the kitchen if they added Obi. As far as with Cleveland, the last 2 years they've used their lottery picks on guard with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, and so there's sort of in a rebuilding mode here, and I think they've got flexibility to add some different guys. And so even though they got Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson, Larry Nance, I think Obi could be their power forward of the future. And, an easy commute for him from Dayton, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what a lot of fans are really hoping for as far as that goes. Now, we've had this debate a lot and this discussion a lot about player comp for Obi Toppin. I've heard from Kenyon Martin to Amari Stoudemire. When you look at the NBA today, and again, obviously his game's going to fit in just fine, but what's a player comp that you have that maybe we haven't heard yet? We've heard Kenyon Martin, Amari Stoudemire. What's a current player comp that you would have for him?
Yeah, I brought up the Amari Stoudemire, comparison before. I actually thought about that when I was in Hawaii at the Maui Invitational. And just his explosiveness and finishing at the rim or way above the rim is similar to Amari. I think the big difference, and a lot of it is just the style of play today, as opposed to when Amari was in his prime, is Obi really shoots the ball from outside. So the combination of him being a finisher at the rim, but also being able to step outside and kind of be a guy that can get some trail threes and pick and pop actions. He actually offensively reminds me a lot of John Collins with the Hawks. And John Collins is going to be a free agent. I think he's probably going to be a max player. I have extremely high hopes for Obi, and I think John Collins is a pretty good comp for him.
Yeah, you talked about the Hawks. That's the team. I mean, you talked the Amari Stoudemire comparison. I was like, well, that's why him and Trae Young would be absolutely perfect together. And there are guards in Cleveland. I worry about him going to Cleveland just because it's Cleveland. But man, I would love to see. I mean, Obi just with the way the floor space is in Golden State, he would just thrive there. I mean, there's so many different situations that would vary from team to team. Send us out with this. We know all the reasons why Obi is going to be drafted high, but what are some things going against him? What are some things that scouts are saying that maybe there's this part of his game that teams aren't a fan of right now?
The defensive side of things, it is definitely not his strength. I mean, he's a pretty stiff guy, even though he's so explosive. His lateral quickness isn't great. A lot of things are brought up about his stiff hips and stuff like that. I'm not overly concerned with it. I don't think most NBA people are. The media and the public and all these independent scouts, they bring it up a whole lot. But I don't really think there are any really glaring weaknesses with him. He's in this first tier of guys, and it's just a matter of these teams figuring out who fits what they're doing best. And so, talent-wise, I think he's as good as anybody in this draft, and he's going to find himself in a good spot. I think, if for some reason Cleveland were to pass on him, I think every single pick after that is going to strongly consider him, just because he's probably going to be the best player on the board.
All right, as we send you out, give everyone a little information about Babcock Hoops and where they can access your latest mock drafts as well as all your content heading in to the NBA Draft on November 18th.
Yeah, no, you follow me on Twitter at MattBabcock11, then on our site, BabcockHoops.com, and then I also contribute to BasketballNews.com as well as CBS Sports HQ. And so just doing a lot of draft coverage, and we're right in the thick of it right now with less than 2 weeks till the draft.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we're excited to be talking some basketball finally, at least for college, that is. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
All right, good stuff there, Matt Babcock.